Hi, and we're back with Mardi Moore, and Marty is the director of Out Boulder County. And Marty and I have known each other for a number of years, so primarily we're going to have a fireside chat here about local responsibility. But before we do that, I'd love to shout out some of our sponsors for Longmont Startup Week. And at the platinum level, we have Arc Thrift Stores and, of course, Avocet, our great friends over at Avocet Communications, Ward Electric Company, and then Longmont Economic Development Partnerships, the LEDP. Also, a big shout out to Biz West at the gold level, Left Hand Brewing, our good friends over there, and Docketly. And then also we have downtown Longmont, of course, and then High Plains Bank, our good friends over at High Plains. Thank you for your support here. In-kind sponsorships have come from Handprint Inc., Circle Graphics, our friends over at Circle Graphics, and then Sticker Giant, where I spend a lot of my daytime activity, and then Chop 5. Thank you all for your sponsorships to help make all this happen. Mardi Moore has been in this work of doing better for our communities for 3 decades. We're in the same age group, so I say 3 decades now rather than 30 years. I think it doesn't make me feel as old.
It softens the blow.
Yeah, exactly. And I've had the great opportunity to be on the board at Out Boulder in years past prior to your joining Out Boulder. And Marty, the work you and your team and the board at Out Boulder are doing in our community is second to none. So we know at the heart of what you do is a lot of LGBTQ plus work. But we're really going to talk about a more broad perspective there around local community responsibility, right?
So, yes, that's what we're going to talk about.
Yeah,
and thanks for the kind words.
Absolutely. Well, kick us off. Can you kind of build a framework for us when we say local responsibility, what that means, and kind of share with our listeners what we're even talking about?
It means there is much to do, so we must proceed slowly.
I like that.
It also means that one of the things I was thinking about this morning when I was walking here to the studio was about civics. And, 3 decades ago, which means I was in high school longer than that ago, we talked about that in school. And we talked about what the responsibility to community is. And in thinking about local business and startup companies and thinking about responsibility, that comes into play. It's not just running a business. It's thinking about, and how this session is framed, about responsibility. It's framed around what is community. Mm-hmm. And then in thinking about a business, because we run a business, right? And the good things come out of business, is what are the benefits of thinking about local community and your responsibilities as a leader of a crew, of somebody in the PTA, et cetera. What are those responsibilities? And it's part of who we are, and it's part of what makes us stronger. And I want more people to think about what their responsibility is to community. In these days of social media, when it's really easy to throw a stone while you're sitting in your bedroom at night on Facebook, this is ridiculous. That is not helpful. What is helpful is thinking through the problem and finding a solution that you can then engage others in addressing it.
You're just making me think this morning. I did the mindful morning, and we were the piece I was talking about is the recognize and allow and that stimulus response. And I think that we get stimulated by things that we think are wrong or not right, and then we move into this really sometimes hot and hurtful and wrong action. So I like what you're saying is we've got lots to do, so let's move slowly. And it really harkens to some of the business tools that we use and agile methods around, quick starts or good starts, but you're using iterative and incremental gains in order to make really big, amazing things happen. So I think that's really alive and well in what you're saying. I also love what you're saying around community actually is where we live and we work, right? And so that we hear so much about work-life balance, and which I could have a whole nother talk on that, but it's really being in direct relationship to the community in which you work and the community in which you live. I'm fortunate in that I live and work in Boulder County, but I live in 2 different cities. So I live in one city, I live in Boulder, and I work here in Longmont. So I get the full.
And mine's the I
Yeah,
live in
you're the
Longmont and I
opposite.
work in Boulder.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. And I love the dichotomy of that life, right? That I see more of a smaller town experience here in Longmont, where Sticker Giant is nested and located, and then the bigger community in Boulder. I live in North Boulder, so it's a little bit of a more diverse neighborhood in the privileged and white bubble that Boulder often can be, right? So I just love how bringing those together and having that conversation of the intersectionality of work and life.
Yeah, and I would even say, in the times of COVID, I brought my mask today, not knowing what the change will be in that, and thinking countywide, and, the virus doesn't stop at the county line.
That's right.
And our work doesn't stop at the county line. But, I think it's trite and it's true, all politics are local. And so, what we do well here, which are so many things in Boulder County, whether that be in the city of Louisville or Lafayette or Jamestown or, Longmont, those things bubble up. We're usually the first at, and I'm so excited for Longmont Startup Week because, you mentioned Boulder and Longmont, like Boulder's bigger. I haven't seen the recent census data, but I think they're getting pretty close in size.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that I like about Longmont in particular is I find it to be more diverse.
Mm-hmm.
Grocery store experiences are more diverse than walking into a different grocery store in Boulder. And Boulder, I'm not here to discount Boulder in any way at all. One of the things that I want to talk a little bit about today is local community. And I think this might be a good segue into that, Beth, in that who is the local community? And to a certain extent, it depends on where you live, right? And what neighborhood you're in, and and what housing laws have impacted where you live. And are you so closed-minded that you want to only live with people that look like you and that have kids and go to the same school, and whatever those choices are that individuals make, and you can make those decisions. But the richness of our local community is often overlooked in big conversations like this.
Yeah.
And so in thinking about local responsibility, you have to think, and we're talking about humans here. We're talking about humans. So what's my local responsibility to the humans who live here? Well, we are a diverse group. And people will often say, well, Boulder County, City of Boulder is 90% white. So we just, that's who we're going to cater to. I think those business decisions are made somewhere along the way. And that's not true. Again, because we live in Boulder County. Boulder County is much more diverse. And the 10% of people of color in Boulder proper matter.
Yes.
And so who is the local community? And so as you're thinking about your startup business, or you're here today because you have a business and you're thinking about new ways that you can engage locally, first you have to define what is local. Our local community is made up of a large Nepali community.
That's right.
Our community is made up, if we're just going to talk percentages,
Mm-hmm.
Large Latino community. Our community has a very small population, but a very active population of Black Americans. Our community is made up of undocumented people.
Mm-hmm.
Our community is made up of trans people. Our community is made up of Chinese people, Asian Pacific Islanders. We are rich. And as businesses and as organizations like Out Boulder, we have responsibility to all. And so how do we do that? I think part of it is acknowledging that and making sure that your plan is inclusive. If you don't have a DEI plan or aren't even thinking about it as you're starting a new business, you are behind the 8 ball in so many ways. not just in who you're going to employ and the richness of a variety of experiences, language, abilities, disabilities, gender identities bring. Like, who's going to go to work for somebody who doesn't have a DEI plan or doesn't even think about it? We're in a new civil rights movement. And what does that look like? And how do we take advantage to strengthen the local community? And I think that's a question that all business leaders, myself included, have to continue to ask ourselves.
Yeah. Well, I think you're leading the community in the fact that you actually run a business. It's a nonprofit, right? So, and I know you care greatly around representation of who's working at Out Boulder, right? And then we do the same at Sticker Giant. We're not perfect, but we are,
Right.
and it's the courage to say, yes, we have a DEI plan, and we are slowly working through that plan. Is it on the pace we'd like to have it? I would say absolutely not.
Right.
But the fact that we have a plan, that we're getting input from our, we refer to each other as giants, our giants, and that we're absolutely after the iterative and incremental gains that we can make rather than, we were just talking in the early session. I just think climate change is a great way to think about these things. Is it can be so enormous that when
Right.
we make the choice, when we make the choices that impact the planet, it's easy to just kind of have a throwaway culture, right? It just goes in the trash and it magically goes away. It's like, well, can we just pick up one thing in the public trash that's not in the recycling and move it over? And I think it's the same around DEI and B, that it's just so important to have it on your heart and your mind, because then that's where the opportunities come up to really
Right.
move into that needed action at any moment.
Here's a real case example.
Yeah.
So yesterday, Out Boulder County is working on a contract with the county. This isn't public information, now it is to whoever's listening, but we haven't announced it yet. And so we're building a program that will serve some folks who can't get into long-term therapy because there aren't enough slots for Medicaid or uninsured income qualifying people. So we're all in this conversation, and we're talking. There's 3 white people and a bicultural, bilingual person. I can't remember which country she represents. And so we're having this whole conversation, and she asked one simple question that changed the layout of the entire program. It was iterative, right? We were thinking about the pieces, but that one piece of information just opened up these services in a number of very important ways because she was there as a part of it. And if somebody is not there, my friend Carmen Ramirez always says that if you're not at the table, you're on the menu.
Oh.
And I find that true. And the tough part about local responsibility is there's a lot of tables. And you can work yourself into getting to the table, but then do you have the bandwidth to make full use of being at that table? Sometimes the answer for me is no. I get there, and then it's a matter of being able to have grown your staff to a level where you get to the table, and then there's somebody else that can take your place as you go find the new table to be at. And so, that's a real life example of the importance of having someone there.
Yeah.
We're working very hard to have most of what we do be in Spanish. One of the good things that came out of this pandemic for Out Boulder County was a strong relationship with El Centro Amistad. And we know that LGBTQ people in the social determinants of health line up almost exactly with the Latinx community. And so we were working on the same barriers. Trans people have IDs that do not match them. Undocumented people have IDs that may not match them. And so how do you get to the vaccine? And so we started working closely together on that, and that simple relationship of working across the table and being invited to the same table has changed things for our local LGBTQ people and for families, Latino families who have LGBTQ family members.
Yeah, I just think it's such a great model, right, that Out Boulder County is is fairly centric to the LGBTQ community, but the way that you look at the community and its broad spectrum, right? While that might be your hub, it's all the spokes that are feeding in that are so important. And I think that's new, right? That's new for organizations to really look at it that way.
Well, the National Gay and Lesbian Task Force, now the LGBTQ Task Force, under the leadership of Ray Carey,
Yeah.
where I had the honor of working for a while, they were way ahead of the curve. They're the oldest national LGBTQ group. I remember hearing them say that choice was an LGBTQ issue, and I'm like, what? Mind blown. And that was years ago. And I was like, what are they thinking? You know, and so there are people out ahead of it, and have been. I think in our situation at Out Boulder County, there are people who think we move too slow, we move in the wrong directions, and and they get to have their opinions. It's hard. I find it hard in running a business that is thinking about people with different abilities. That is thinking, like we tried to start with Center for People with Disabilities, who's one of, actually it wasn't CPWD, another disability group. We started a support group for people with different abilities who were trans. And we got it running for a little bit, but we hadn't thought through all the different, what it needed to look like differently.
Yeah.
It wasn't just a space. Are we going to let caregivers in who are not trans? What, do we have to educate them? It's a whole bigger piece that needs to be worked on, and time takes time sometimes. And so there are efforts that we've started that we haven't been able to successfully reach, but it doesn't mean it's off the table.
Yeah. I think what you're pointing to too for our audience around startup and business is when we get siloed, right? If you just take community action endeavors and needed activity and you make them too specific, right? Then they aren't as effective. So it's one of the things I really admire about the work that you and your team and the board there are doing.
One of the great things about Pride is it brings everybody together in one space. And to see the richness, I'm that old dyke who was done with Pride a long time ago, and now we have two. But that's the excitement for me, is seeing all of the intersections in one place.
Yeah. That's the fruit of the intent, right?
Right.
Is actually when you see at Pride so many more people represented. Yeah, I think that's really important.
Yeah.
Where do you want to take us next?
Well, I was thinking about, so we talked about what local community is, and I'd like to talk about responsibility, I think.
Yeah, I think that's great.
It's a big word. I almost looked it up just to make sure I understood it, but I let that go because I think I know what responsibility is, and I hope those who are watching today, if you're not quite sure how that might apply to you, go ahead and take a look at that definition. It starts small, right? You have responsibility to yourself. What's local responsibility? Let's start at home. It's that I need to feed myself. I need to sleep. I need to meditate. I need to pray. Do I get those done every day? No. But that's my responsibility to myself. My responsibility to myself is to be good to my friends, to build new friends. One of the things that's been tough about the pandemic is it's harder to meet new people. But luckily I've got some good friends. So those have taken place, but like taking care of people. I live next to a school. They don't have enough staff to pick up the trash. So when Chewy and I go for a walk every day, I think it's my responsibility to pick up the basketball court. Some kids left their sodas, right? So every day starts with the mailman. Sometimes they have to send out letters to the neighborhood, like don't park in front of the mailbox. It's my responsibility when I moved my car this morning for the painters to not park in front of the mailbox. So there are all these little things that make everybody's day a little brighter. And so, that's friends. But what's the larger community? And back to the civics point. There are so many ways to engage, and I think business has a responsibility to make sure that their employees can engage in those. It's good for business, it's good for human beings, and it's good for the community. I looked last night, I was thumbing through Instagram, and downtown Longmont had a post. And in their post, they say, we have upcoming opportunities to volunteer. We have Summer on the Streets, Downtown Summer Concert, Art Walk, the 150th celebration, the tree lighting ceremony. I could go on and on. They're looking for volunteers. How about Sticker Giant, because you all are active. I know from our relationship what you all, the Giants, pull off. Tree lighting? It's not a Christmas tree lighting, it's a tree lighting. I mean, there's
Yes,
pieces
yeah.
of that, right? But like, what a fun activity.
Yeah.
Give the staff a half day off, paid, to make sure that all the kids coming down Main Street and little kids like me see the tree when we're out shopping,
Yeah.
right? And so there's ways to engage, which then helps downtown Longmont.
Well, I love what you're pointing to, because I think the pandemic has really impacted us in ways that we will be figuring out for a long time to come. And when I was listening to you, I was thinking about how we can become bystanders so easily,
Yes.
right? And it's someone else's responsibility. I'm like you, I pick up trash in my neighborhood.
Right.
We live next door to where there's a number of kids, right? And kids, I didn't do it when I was a kid, but I pick up their trash.
Right.
But no one's coming to help us if we don't show up. And it's really hard, because right now things are shifting with the pandemic again. And, what's that going to do to our ability to get out and participate? And then for organizations, whether it's the city of Longmont, Out Boulder, and so many great organizations that need and only thrive with people volunteering their time, and also where you give your money matters,
Yeah, it
right?
does.
So I think we've got to really challenge ourselves on that individual level, that hub you're at. I know you're going to stretch it out here in a minute, that we're coming out of this call out culture, and I think what you're doing is calling us in, right? Calling us into our personal responsibility, so that we bring that to work and we bring that into our community, and we activate that sense of what can be done now, what is in something that we can do now, rather than it's all so big and happening to me. So
Right.
I just love the way you're shaping what that looks like.
My mind kind of exploded as you were talking about that. And one of the things that, in thinking about responsibility, it can come out of like an interesting family dynamic, right? Where you've had to be like over responsible. So like, I don't want to put my like picking up the trash on somebody else, right? So where does that come from? And examining that.
Yes.
And so, time out on that, if that needs to be examined, right? Some
Right.
of us are over responsible for bad reasons. There's also the piece that the responsibility, it's like the bigger vision that you were touching on, which is, I am responsible for that. It is that one piece of trash, because with it comes my whole body and my whole mind. This is my community. And if it's a business, it's like, this is your community where you thrive for the most part. We have a great business community. Are you a member of, in thinking about this, are you as a business leader, which we know, like Beth, I don't know when you sleep, but it's hard to get that sleep thing in, because there's so much,
Yes.
especially when we're in this new civil rights movement, and like, how fast can we move and where? And the pandemic. Right, so there's all these added pieces, and we do know also coming out of the pandemic that people's mental health is poor.
Yes.
It's very poor. We have statistics we haven't released yet because they're so bad, that we want to have the current solution to be able to announce that when we announce the numbers. And so, maybe it's the older woman walking down my street today who stopped at the garden and looked at the sunflower, right? And so that local responsibility to other humans and to the environment matter. Making that larger, when you get to businesses, it's like, do you have, I know Sticker Giant, and we enjoy a great relationship with Sticker Giant, whether that being at Pride, having all your crew there, people checking in on us, donating vaccine stickers. Like when we ran out because we didn't know what we were doing, your crew, putting us ahead in the line and getting stuff done for the local community, and also the money that you all give.
Yeah.
And those sponsorships are important. I know that Avocet and some of the sponsors you mentioned today,
Yes.
like, they gave a lot. They gave more than their share. Who wants Startup Week to continue? Who's watching this great programming? You all should just get to your budget right now, because you're working on them for the following year, and put $5,000 in it and know that you're supporting the entire community.
Yeah.
And if you have a DEI plan and you look at that and you figure out, what are we doing around inclusion? Maybe it's your hiring practices. Maybe it's not money. Maybe you need to look through your forms. On gender identity, is the question male and female? I bet it is. Why is that? We've always done it that way.
Yeah.
And so, on that piece, or, who are the most prioritized? Depends on which crowd you're in. We're either prioritized or marginalized. I just think of
We're
us
either
as special.
dominant or underrepresented,
Yes,
right?
right,
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, whatever the word is, there are barriers in place for people for reasons that others find beneficial. Like, break those down. I think this is something that every company should have, which is a matching gift program. So, we've talked a little bit about sponsorship dollars, whether that be to the Longmont Ballet, to El Comité, to Out Boulder County. Those dollars matter a lot, whether it be from an individual or from the company in marketing dollars or community giving dollars, however the company frames that. The one thing that's important, because leaders come and go. So that was that leader's, like, we want to support Out Boulder County. New leader comes, it's like, oh, the gays, they have it great. We need to direct our money somewhere else. If the company has done its job and has a matching gift company, employees have connected with Out Boulder County.
Yeah.
They volunteered here, they went there, they have a relationship and know what's going on at the organization. And they might give us $50. And that is an important gift. Because if your majority of your funding as a nonprofit doesn't come from individuals, you're likely to tip over.
Mm-hmm.
And so those are important. What if Sticker Giant then gave $50? All of a sudden you have 100, and it's a benefit for somebody who thinks about local community.
Yeah. We don't have gift matching right now at Sticker Giant, and it is one of the things that is on our roadmap, right?
Right.
So we're not there, but we see it on the horizon. One of the things I think I'll just share that we do in order to not just have a leader make the decision about where the money's going to go, or what where we're going to support the local community. We have a community team.
That's great.
Right, and so it's not me saying give here or don't do that. I actually see what happens at the end of the month and where the dollars went, and we really feature like our in-kind gifts and things of that nature.
Mm-hmm.
So I think what matters is, and that's what our Giants said they wanted. They wanted to be more involved in that process. And we had it for several years where we had funded money and we would give the money, and it had some of that flavor, but it has a whole lot more of that
That's
flavor
fantastic.
now.
Yeah.
And I love the earlier session with that we were talking about. You can have great hiring practices, but what we're talking about right now in organizations, in small organizations, is how do you keep the diversity in your groups, right? That's by listening and having them tell you where they want to see the impact in the community, and we just follow that, right? Sustainability and human services were the top responses from our Giants that said where they want to see us be active, right, with our time and our money and our in-kind donations. So that's where we're spending our time. We're still a small company, right? We're 118 folks, and we have to be specific, but yet have enough flexibility for our employees to actually say, this is where we want to see more activity. So I'm super proud, as you might imagine, of our community team and the great work and the way they make those decisions together. So.
It was nice the other day, the knock on my door is one of your Giants.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, like, hey, hey.
And then we see each other out in the community.
Right.
So I think it's we're really talking too about the fabric we're weaving, I believe, right? It's about being connected and the relationships that are built are really what buoy us through really difficult times. And the good times,
Right,
We
somebody to
celebrate
celebrate with.
together, right?
Yep.
We bring all the largest sticker ball out to Pride, right?
Yep.
This year, and the motorcade strapped on the back of my truck, super fun. That was the first time
I love
Saul had
Saul.
been out. But that's community connection, and that doesn't have a monetary value, but it has a human value. That our companies and our key organizations providing key human services to the folks that live in the community we're surrounded with, that matters a lot to me as well.
Yeah, it's apparent. It's apparent. So thank you for
Thank
all
you.
the Giants do in the community.
Thank you
I
for-
know we're not the only organization that is supported by Sticker Giant.
Well, and I will say to our listeners, you can go to stickergiant.com/, sponsorship. I'm only featuring that as a way for you to gain access to how to get in-kind sponsorships and other types of sponsorships that we do locally and really nationally. So that is one way to get connected.
That's
Yeah.
great. Great. One other little, I don't know, the timekeeper, I don't know who's in charge, but this is one of the things that I was
That'd be
writing.
me, Mark.
Okay, so
I'm in-
stop me if I'm running long.
No, you're good.
But one of the things I was thinking about organizationally, and we have to talk about it as staff, because there's budget implications, and I think that it's easily solvable. We haven't talked about it. Is now the new National Juneteenth holiday,
Yes.
right? And is that, as we're planning for the new year, do we trade something out? Do we put in the budget, we're going to get one more? And then not just a day off. Like, what does that mean? Conversations around that. Organizationally, what does that mean? Individually.
Yes.
So things are always changing, and it's a matter of keeping your eye on some of that.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up, and I'll just share. We're in some early days around how we're handling that, and we've chosen to, for some business reasons and also for diversity reasons, we've put flexible holidays in place for the first time at Sticker Giant, where we're not taking as many days off for certain holidays that all people don't engage in or support, right? I mean, nobody's not going to take 2 days off at Christmas, whether you're a Christian and celebrate that or not. You kind of get the idea. But we're really passionate about giving flexibility, right? So how do we meet our business needs? We're an e-commerce company. We're kind of always open, so to speak.
Right.
And then still have the ability for our giants to make a decision about what day they want to take off. So while Juneteenth can be and is very important to me, I don't want to assume that that's important to everybody in our organization, right? So how do we celebrate that day to draw more attention to it, which we've done some, but we've got a lot of work to do there. And then how do we actually offer that day off for people where that really means something to them, but another person might not want that day, and they might want to take more time at some other time, whether it's related to a holiday or not. So it's kind of the way we've taken our first run at it, right? We're sort of in our early first run on how to step up into that moment, and we're finding our way.
Thanks for that tip,
Yeah.
because we've got to figure out what we're doing.
Well, and I think every organization has its own complex nature, right? So I want to just that's what we chose to do, sort of as our early decision. But you may work in an organization where it's absolutely right to be closed on Juneteenth. But there may be other reasons why that could be complex for your business. But how do you still meet the moment is the question, and how do you keep meeting the moment? We're never going to be done, right? We're never going to be done.
Never going to be done. The other thing, and Beth, I wonder if you all are doing this, at 118, you may be of the size. Do you have employee resource groups?
We do not, and it is also on that horizon. It came up in the earlier segment too. Even larger organizations struggle with employee resource groups and affinity groups, right? And how to get them well supported. I'm a big fan of teams that get self-organized, right? Like our community team is pretty self-organized. We have a giant that leads that team, Shandell, as you know
Yes,
well.
yes.
And she does such a beautiful job.
I didn't want to call her out. That's who knocked on the door.
Oh, yeah, I knew it was. So we don't want to put something in play that we don't know that we can fully support. And that's a hardship for me because I'm really passionate about having an employee resource group. And we don't have a good idea yet enough, right? And I hope there's one of our giants listening that will hear what I'm saying and then send me a Slack that I read right after this that says, I'll step in, right? I'll help. And that's often how we end up doing things is employees will step into things. We have a sustainability team right now. We knew we needed it. We knew we wanted it. We'd done some things, and we had some key employees step in and say, we'll lead it. And they do some really beautiful work. So that's kind of where we are in the size company we are. Feeling uncomfortable that we're not doing enough,
And
yet we're in our moment, and we're going to just keep working to move ourselves forward.
one of the things that bothers me, so the salary versus non-hourly people,
Yes.
right? And so one of my employees, Juan, he will always pick up something extra, always. And so he'll end up, he was the Colorado Gay Rodeo after he'd already worked way too many hours because it's an opportunity that he wants for the organization. And so I struggle with compensation around that. So we're not we're building in a salary, and we use the Colorado Nonprofit Salary Guide. We do a little more because Boulder County is more expensive than if you look at that. So, he might say, I don't think he would, that he's underpaid. And yet he's above, oh my God, his number of hours and the work he does in the community, for the community. Like, how do you, so if you get a giant sends you a Slack and says, I'm gonna do that, is that because they're a salaried person and all of a sudden you don't have to pay them more and that works out for the budget? It doesn't sit right with me, and I haven't figured out a solution. What about you?
Yeah, I'm with you. I don't have a great answer there, right?
Yeah.
I think when people are contributing more of their talent and time, certainly all of our teams that do the teamwork, right, around community and sustainability do it on paid time. So it's a great question. I don't really have a great answer, but thank you for sort of knocking on that
because in
door.
nonprofits, bonuses are kind of like, oh God, you shouldn't bonus anybody. There's this whole, also United Way said you can't spend more than 25 cents on every dollar in keeping the place together,
Yeah.
right? And so, I feel like that's outdated, but who's going to push United Way? But also, so it's a question that I struggle with some.
Yeah, I think it's when opportunity for engagement sort of runs too far, right? And where employees are going to step up and want to do things because they're passionate about it. How do we meet them there, right? Rather than just with the thank you, which I think is a lot, right? But again, it's just back to having the courage to say, is that enough?
Right.
It's not enough. And sit in that discomfort. I'm still going back to this morning's mindful morning, right? And that's what we were talking about having the courage to sit in the discomfort of things and hold that until something clear emerges. Now, we can't sit in discomfort forever, right? We do need to have an action orientation, right? So it's not just sitting in all this discomfort and saying we're uncomfortable and not doing anything. But it is, what are the small things, daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, annually, that we can show we're making progress? Because I think we all get down on ourselves in organizations and personally that we're just not doing enough. And how can we let that be true while we're still working on today's work? That's my ongoing question.
It's a great question, and I heard the question, and I was thinking about like what my answer is to that. And fear is the great roadblock, right? And I have found myself more than once in the situation where because of the call-out culture. I'm afraid to take a step that I think is the right step. Because Out Boulder matters, because I also have feelings, I'm inhuman, but that can like freeze you. So I think it's really important to have a team around you in those moments when you get stuck that you trust, and that you know might disagree with you, and that you listen and you make that
Yeah.
shift.
Yeah.
But it's a good question you ask.
Yeah. I'm thinking about I've been recently sharing this, and I think it's appropriate here is, I think we get stuck when we start thinking about blame and shame and fault-finding culture, right? And our culture is steeped in that, right, of finding blame and assessing fault. And I think that's what makes us fearful. And it gets us into that inaction place
Right.
that actually is so detrimental. So I've been working with this inner reflection myself around, it's not my fault, but it is my responsibility. And I know, because,
Wow.
right, there's some power in that. Like, if we can see that the racial divide in our country and the responsibility that we have locally to help more folks in need, those things aren't my fault. But if I get really honest with myself as a human, as a community member, and as a leader in a business, how do I step into responsibility, right? And then how do I not get too overly, right, active in that responsibility, because we can do that too, right, as being white and privileged, that we step into the responsibility by starting to look around us and then bring more people into the responsibility that we share together, right? And for me, that's what makes it all worth it, because, we all have such feelings of aloneness. The pandemic has amplified those. You pointed to the impacts on mental health there. It's time for us to link arms on these things and make some of these close in, like what's here today, this week, how can we continue to keep moving forward? Because we get weary in the journey when we get alone, right? And I'm sure you can relate as the executive director of a nonprofit, how weary it can be in the human service providing world.
Yeah, and especially as a small nonprofit.
Yeah.
Right? And so I'm excited. We, in fact, somebody right now, I couldn't join in the conversation, are reviewing the final resumes for a deputy director. And it will be nice to have somebody to collaborate with. I'm a big collaborator.
Yeah.
And I believe I collaborate with my staff, but there is that weird power dynamic also, which I often forget about, which is like I'm the boss, right? And so I don't think about it enough. But it'll be nice to have somebody when I'm stuck, to be able to talk to. Some people call them a work wife. And so
Your dream come true,
my dream
Marty.
come true. Now if I could just find a pool boy, it'll all work out, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm excited about that, because it does get lonely.
Yeah, I think you're really pointing to something that's important, and we'll talk about this and maybe make some closing comments here. I think, it's easy in leadership roles to forget the power differential, and I'm guilty of it myself, right? I'll say, hit me up on Slack. I walk around and ask people how they're doing, and the distance between the truth of what they want to say to me because of the role that I have, but that keeps me humble and makes me really stay available and have lots of casual conversations and make myself visible, and all those things are really important. But I actually know, safe enough at work that is an endeavor that never goes away, right? To have a safe enough place at work, because in reality, what we know is people didn't grow up with that idea.
Right.
People may not have that idea in their current living situation. So us as leaders at work saying, oh, we want to create a safe enough culture for you to just speak your mind and tell us what you think. People are going to make mistakes. They absolutely are going to make mistakes in an attempt to do that, and people still aren't going to trust it, right? but we do have a responsibility, back to, it is our responsibility to over and over again continue to cultivate that in the workplace so we can have a ripple effect on people's lives. They leave with that skill, and maybe they go home to their partner or their kids or their neighbor, and maybe they have a more rich experience of sharing what it's like to be them because they were able to do that at work. That's always my hope, right? Is somehow
The
at
ripples.
work, what we're doing
Right.
has impact on people's families, the community, and honestly, our world at large.
I would agree with that. I love
Yeah.
that. I love that visual.
Well, I'll just close with another appreciation for you and the work that you're doing in our community. And I love, again, I'm just going to say it one more time, that the concentric hub of what you do at Out Boulder is around services for the LGBTQ plus community. But you know you can't do that in that vacuum or that silo. And the work you're doing with the Latinx community and veterans and the aging community, right? It's and accessibility for our differently abled community members, our homeless community members.
Yes.
All of those I know are at the heart of what you all are doing there. So
And hate crimes. I mean, we didn't
yes,
even
we didn't even get to domestic
Yeah.
violence, and the numbers off the chart because of the pandemic, and the numbers off the chart in same-sex relationships, which
Yes, it
many
is.
heterosexual people don't really consider, that the hate crimes there and the domestic violence are quite a lot.
But
So-
let's leave somewhere happy. Where are we going to leave?
Yeah, my goodness,
There's so
I got
much.
us
I'll
down
see you
a
next week
downer.
here.
Yes, well, I'll just pivot to the next session is a panel. Really looking forward, Marty is going to join us on this panel, and we have Regina Smith coming from Naropa, and Amy and Jackie. No,
Angie, sorry.
Angie, Angie
Terrible
will
with
be
me.
back as well. So take a coffee break, and we'll see you right at the top of the hour at 11 o'clock. Thanks for joining us.